So I'm going to be going over the just fire mission with artillery and mortars. So we're going to start with the essential blueprint of the call for fire, which is going to be the 6 elements. So first you're going to have the observer ID, which is just going to be the battery call sign, and then this is your call sign. So for example, Steel Rain, this is Misfit 1-1. And then you have the warning order, which there's more that can go into this. However, typically you're just going to have the type of mission, but there's more that can go over that. If I'm going to go more in depth in that, I can do that in a different video, but for this one, it'll just be just fire over. So this is going to be the first transmission. This is all said in one transmission, so it'll all sound like Steel Rain. This is Misfit 1-1. Just fire over. The next one is going to be the target location. So in this video, I'm just going to be going over grid, which is standard. However, you could also do polar, shift from known point, etc. But grid is typically the most used, and it's also the standard, so I'll just do that. So for example, grid November Tango 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're going to have the grid zone identifier, November Tango, and then at least 6 digits for the grid. You could do 8 or 10 if you wish. However, for artillery and mortars, which are an area fire weapon, that is often unnecessary. But this in itself is the second transmission. And coming in with number 4, you have the target description. Now, the target description is going to consist of the size, type, and degree of protection. So easily remembered with S. That's kind of hard to see. S, T, D. So with size, you can do either a number. So for example, here I use 2. You could do maybe like squad sized element, platoon sized element, company sized element. So you could do either number or size. Type is just going to be what is it. So for this example, I used BMPs, which is a infantry fighting vehicle. And lastly, we're going to have degree of protection. So this could be like, in this example, in the open, meaning it's not protected by anything. Let's say you could do dug in tree line, etc. So you're just going to say like if it's actually protected by its environment or its surroundings. So just for this example, I did 2 by BMPs in the open. Next, you're going to have the method of engagement and the method of fire control, which is 5 and 6. However, these have their own standards, meaning you oftentimes don't need to amend these, which means you'll omit it from the call for fire. And to give more context on that, artillery and mortars within NATO have standards for things such as grid is the standard method of target location. So when I'm in my warning order, I don't need to say just fire grid over because they already know it's going to be grid if I don't say anything because that is a standard. If I wanted to deviate from that standard, let's say polar, I'd have to say it just fire polar over, but I don't need to because it's grid. So method engagement, there are standards for this, and method of fire control, there are standards for this as well. So oftentimes, you can just completely omit this. However, if you do want to change something from it, then you do need to specify that. So for example, I amended the danger close situation. Let's say that the target is within 600 meters. So 600 meters is danger close for both artillery and mortars. So anything between 600 or below, that is danger close. So you're going to say danger close, ground force commander's initials, Juliet Delta. And the ground force commander's initials part, this is just the ground force commander giving clearance for you to send this fire mission up, even though there's a possibility of effects on friendly forces. So if the target is within 600 meters of the nearest friendly position, whether that be you or somebody else that's on your side, you will need to specify danger close and give the ground force commander's initials. You'll need to ask the ground force commander for these initials, which will tell the battery shooting this mission that he has approved it and is accepting responsibility for the outcome of this fire mission, good or bad. Method of fire control. I amended the method of control. The standard is when ready, which means they're going to shoot this fire mission when they're ready. However, I just specified at my command, which means they're not going to shoot until I tell them to. So that's just an example of something you could amend. However, in the actual example I'm going to be giving for this video, I'm not going to actually amend the method of engagement or fire and control. This is just to give you an example of what that looks like. But these two elements right here, 5 and 6, sorry. But these three elements, 4, 5, and 6, are all part of the third transmission. So as you can see, there are 3 separate transmissions which are going to initiate the call for fire. So to put it all together, Steel Rain, this is Misfit 1-1. Just fire over. The battery will read that back. Misfit 1-1, this is Steel Rain. Just fire out. And then the observer will say, Grid November Tango 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Over. The battery will read back. Grid November Tango 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out. The observer will say, 2 by BMPs in the open. Danger close. Ground Force Commander's initials. Juliet Delta. At my command. Over. And then the battery will read back. 2 by BMPs in the open. Danger close. Ground Force Commander's initials. Juliet Delta. At my command. Out. And just like that, you've initiated a call for fire. So next, we have an actual template that I've created to essentially just show the, to initiate the call for fire I'm going to be using for this example for this video. So this will be the battery call sign, and this will be my call sign. So we're going to say the battery's call sign is Steel Rain. And my call sign will be Misfit 1-1. The grid that I will be using is November Tango 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, And for my third transmission, I'm not going to amend the method of engagement or methods of fire control. So I'm just going to be offering a target description. So I will be doing 2 by BMPs in the open. So how this is going to sound: Steel Rain, this is Misfit 1-1, adjust fire over. Battery's going to say, Misfit 1-1, this is Steel Rain, adjust fire out. The observer will say, Grid November Tango 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, over. The battery will say, Grid November Tango 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, out. Then the observer will say, 2 by BMPs in the open, over. And then the battery will read back, 2 by BMPs in the open, out. And just like that, the call for fire for this adjust fire mission has been initiated. So after receiving the call for fire, the battery will generate something called the message to observer, or MTO for short. So what the message to observer consists of is changes to the call for fire, the firing agency call sign, number of guns, number of rounds, target number, and additional information. Now, not all of these things will actually be included, but if they are included, this is the order that they will be in, and this is everything that can be included. So if the battery wants to change something, let's say if you request a certain type of ammunition in your method of engagement, then if they can't support that, they will change that and let you know what that change was in the message to observer. Because remember, a call for fire is a request and not an order. The battery does not need to shoot it. They don't need to shoot it exactly how you're asking. So if they can't support it, or just simply it doesn't not practical for them, they will amend it. The firing agency call sign is just going to be the battery's call sign. The number of guns is how many guns will be shooting during that mission. The number of rounds is how many rounds each gun will be shooting for that fire mission. The target number, which is what will be associated with your fire mission, and this will now be how you preface each transmission within your fire mission, and then any additional information they want to pass you. So, for example, the battery is going to say, message to observer, Steel Rain, 3 guns, 3 rounds, target number Alpha Bravo 1025, over. The observer will write that down and then read it back verbatim. It needs to be read back exactly how it was transmitted to you by the battery. If it is read back at all incorrectly, out of order, anything of that nature, then the battery will correct you and continue to read this message to observer until you read it back the right way. So the observer is going to read back message to observer, Steel Rain, 3 guns, 3 rounds, target number Alpha Bravo 1025. Now I'm going to take a quick pause here. Since it is a just fire mission, you need to send the observer target line, OTL, which is the direction in Mills grid from you. So let's say this is you. The target is this. And this is the direction. Now this line isn't actually portraying 200 mils. However, it's just an example, so excuse that. But from you, the observer, to the target, you're going to get the direction in Mills grid. And let's just say that somehow this line is 200 mils. So 200. You are then going to brief the battery your observer target line / direction, because they need this to make adjustments off of your perspective. Without their direction, without the observer's direction, they wouldn't know what you're making corrections off of, so they need the observer target line to base the corrections off of. So Direction should be sent within the message to observer transmission. However, it can also be sent at the beginning of the first correction. If you're sending it within the message to observer transmission, ensure you say break in between the end of the MTO and the beginning of you transmitting direction. So what that's going to sound like here, after you read all of this, you're going to say break direction 3200 over. The battery's going to say direction 3200 out. So now the battery has your direction that they're going to base adjustments off of. So after the message to observer, you transmitting your observer target line / direction and the battery reading it back. This fire mission was sent as a when ready fire mission because that is a standard and I did not amend that in my method of control in my third transmission. So when they are ready to shoot, the battery will transmit target number Alpha Bravo 1025 shot over, which all this is saying is that the battery has shot the first adjustment round for your fire mission. And remember, I said earlier, each transmission will be prefaced with the target number after you get that in the MTO. This is an example of that, and you'll see this throughout the fire mission. The observer will then read back target number Alpha Bravo 1025 shot out. That is just you acknowledging to the battery that you understand they have shot. Now, this is optional, this transmission. The battery does not need to say this. However, some unit SOPs, standard operating procedures, dictate that they will, some dictate that they won't. In the event that you do get this call, which is going to be splash, this is just a courtesy call from the battery letting the observer know that the round should impact the deck within the next 5 seconds. So the battery will just say splash over. This is just, I think, the only exception to prefacing things with the target number. Oftentimes batteries will not say target number Alpha Bravo 1025 splash over. Sometimes they just say splash over. I don't know why, it's just the way it is. So if they do say this, it's just a courtesy call and it does not need to be read back. If you do read it back, that's fine. No harm, no foul. However, it's not necessary. But this is just going to depend on your unit or battery's standard operating procedures. So you see the first round impact, and now it's time to make adjustments / corrections. Corrections will be sent in a specific order. So deviation, this being left or right. And then range, which is add or drop. And then height of burst, which is up or down. So deviation is how far left or right the adjustment round was from the target. Range is how far or how close was the adjustment round from the target. And then height of burst, which this is oftentimes not necessary because this is only going to be applicable if you're doing an air burst round, meaning the round is going to explode while it's in the air, pretty self-explanatory, or if you're doing like an illumination mission where you are going to have the illumination round employ in the air. So most of the time you can completely omit height of burst, and that is what we'll be doing in this scenario because it is going to be the round is going to be impacting on the deck, so height of burst is not necessary in this situation. So I'm just going to be worrying about deviation and range. And I'll go into an example of what that will be pretty soon here. But first, I'm going to go into the methods of bracketing, or methods of correcting, or methods of adjusting, however you want to say it. You have 4 options. Successive bracketing, this is the best for beginners, and it never fails. Even experienced, seasoned forward observers, JFOs, JTACs use successive bracketing because it is so reliable. You also have hasty bracketing, creeping fires, and one round adjust. So what all of these are is successive bracketing is simply adding or dropping 400 meters and then cutting that correction in half each time you make a correction. I'll expand on this more in a little bit. Hasty bracketing, which is making one bold correction and then one bold add or drop correction and using that as a way for you to judge range. So you can kind of use that as a quote unquote yardstick. And then you'll make one more correction, which should be on the target because you are able to judge range better, having seen how that one bold correction looked from that distance. Creeping fires, which is consistently adding or dropping 100 meters. This is used for danger close. And the reason for that being is there's less room for error on either your or the battery's end because you're making such minimal corrections or corrections in a really minimal distance. So you won't accidentally make too much of a bold correction, which is going to be way too close to friendlies in danger close situations. And then you have one round adjust. This one's pretty self-explanatory. You're just going to see the round lands, and if you're confident enough that you know the deviation and range to a good extent, then you will just make one adjustment. Just be like, left 30, add 200, fire for effect. However, this is not recommended for beginners because it is the easiest to mess up, and if you mess that one up, it's going to just kind of be a big issue and you're just going to be wasting time making a bunch of corrections when you could have just been successive bracketing. I will go over what each of these will look like more in depth pretty soon here on the next page, but for now I'm going to also go over the OT factor. The OT factor is the distance from the observer to the target, and each 1,000 meters equals 1 OTF. So, if your target is 2,000 meters away, what is the OTF? Well, if 1,000 meters is 1 OTF, 2,000 meters, that's just going to be 2. So your OT factor is 2. Target is 2,500 meters away. What is the OTF? Well, so if 2,000 is 2 and 1,000 is 1, you're just going to cut that 1,000 in half, and that's just going to be 2.5. So what is this used for? When you're at a distance from the target when looking through your binoculars, the deviation gets more bold the further it is away. So you use the OT factor as a simple math equation to make proper deviation corrections that will accommodate for that long distance from you to the target, just from you having a different perspective. So the OTF multiplied by the adjustment around deviation equals the deviation correction. So by adjustment around deviation, I mean if the target is right here and your round landed right here. Let's say you're looking through your binoculars and this is your deviation like line in the binoculars you're going to use. This is a very poor drawing. I apologize, but we're going to say this is 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0. So from the impact of your round, which is right here, to the target, it's 3-0. So the target from the grid you pulled off of your map, you are going to deduct that it is 2,000 meters away. So, correction, it's going to be 3,000 for this example. So the target is 3,000 meters away. So if 1,000 meters equals 1 OTF, you have 3,000, so that's 3. So you're going to do 3 multiplied by 30, which is going to be 90. So your deviation correction is going to be, in this situation, since it is right of the target, you want to go left. So it's going to be left 90. So I've set up this graph, which is going to show what each method of correction will generally look like. So we'll start off with successive, which is generally what you're going to want to do. So let's say your adjusting round lands here, which you can spot that it is short of the target and right of the target. So when looking through your binos, you can deduct that the distance between your round, the deviation between the target and your adjusting round was 4-0. So what you're going to do is you're going to make your first correction of left 4-0, add 400. You're just going to do 4-0 because let's say the target is exactly 1,000 meters away from you. So the OT factor is 1. And you got this 4-0 by looking in your binoculars, and by using the reticle in the binoculars, you could deduct that it is 4-0 to the right. So you want it to go 4-0 to the left, which should bring it in line with the target if your correction was spot on. And you are going to add 400, which 400, where did that come from? That is just the standard for successive bracketing. This will only work if your TLE, which TLE equals target location that doesn't look good. Error. Naturally, when you're finding targets, especially if you're just doing it with a map and a compass, you're going to be off, and the distance of what you expected the target to be, which would have been right here, and where it actually is, that is your target location error. Anyways, so if your TLE is equal to or less than 400, then this will work. If it is greater than this, you may need to do 800. So you would add 800 and then follow the next steps. Just ideally, though, you will be within 400. Your TLE will be less than that. Otherwise, there was a serious issue with your target location. So you do that. You transmit target number Alpha Bravo 1025, left 40, add 400, over. The battery's going to read back target number Alpha Bravo 1025, left 40, add 400, out. And once again, you're going to get your shot call. So target number Alpha Bravo 1025, shot, over. And then the observer's going to read back target number Alpha Bravo 1025, shot, out. May or may not receive a splash call, but let's say the deviation correction was good, but now it's over. So this will be your second impact. So now you can deduct that it is over, but line, meaning it is your adjusting round was in line with the target. However, it's still over the target. So what you're going to do is just cut this in half and do the opposite of your last range correction. So in this instance, we're going to do a drop 200. So target number operator 1025, drop 200 over. The battery's going to read that back. You're going to get your shot call. And now it's going to land right here. So now you can still see that it is lined with the target. However, it is short now. So all you're going to do is just cut that in half again and do the opposite of drop, which is going to be add. So your third correction. Add 100. Target number operator 1025, add 100 over. Battery's going to read that back. You're going to get your shot call. You're going to read that back. Boom. It's even closer now. So now you are about to break the 100-meter bracket, which is one of the criteria for entering the fire for effect phase, which I will expand on that later in this video. But because you are making a correction less than 100, you are going to enter the fire for effect phase. So your next correction is going to be drop 50, fire for effect. Because you are so close to the target that you know now when you cut this in half and you drop it, it is going to be within 50 meters of the target because that is how successive bracketing works. So you're going to transmit target number Bravo 1025, drop 50, fire for effect over. Battery is going to read that back verbatim, and you're going to get your shot call. And it's going to land, theoretically, right on the target and blow it up. And then you will go on with the further transmission of that fire mission. And I will go over those final transmissions after this. So next, hasty bracketing. So let's say your target lands over here. Sorry, your adjustment round lands over here. You're going to make one bold correction and use that as a yardstick. So I'm going to say the distance between, the deviation between these two, I'm going to say it's 30. And I'm going to assume that this is 1,000 meters away, so OT factor is 1. I'm going to do a right 30. And then I'm going to just right off the bat drop 200. So target number operator 1025, right 30, drop 200 over. Battery's going to read that back. You're going to get your shot call. The observer's going to read that back, and it's going to land, let's say, right here. Now, you know that from here to here is 200 meters. So now you know what that looks like. This looks to be about a third of 200, give or take. So honestly, if you add, that's I mean, a third of 200. So you know that from here to here is 200, and this looks to be about a third of that, give or take. So a third of 200 is 66.6. Now you can't do that correction because the minimum correction is 100 meters for range for artillery. Unless you're entering the fire for effect phase, then you could do 50 meters. And to kill a target, because the effective casualty radius, ECR, for 155 millimeter artillery is 50 meters. So if I were to add 50, because that's close as 66.6 as I can get, that will bring me within 16 meters of this target, which is well within the 50-meter effective casualty radius. So my next correction is going to be add 50, fire for effect. Now, this technique is not recommended for beginners, and honestly, it's probably the least used one. However, it does exist if you want to use it. So if you're not completely fully understanding this one, it's not a huge deal because it's not used too often. Okay, so now for creeping fires, I mentioned this is mostly, actually, this is like almost used exclusively for danger close situations. So I moved the observer closer to the target. Let's say from you to the target is 500 meters. So you're within danger close. Let me just label that. So from you to the target's 500 meters. So you're going to want to utilize creeping fires to minimize the chance of user error either on your end or the battery's end with bold corrections, because if a bold correction is made and it is not a good one, you could theoretically accidentally injure yourself. So you're just going to do increments of 100. So let's say the round impacts up here, so you can deduct that this is line with the target, so your deviation is fine. You don't need to make any deviation corrections, but it is over the target. So what you're going to do is you're just going to drop 100 meters consistently until you're on the target. So your first correction, drop 100. Let's say that goes through, and your next one lands right here. You're going to drop 100 again. That happens, it lands right here. Let's say that this is within 50 meters of the target, so now you can enter the fire for effect phase. So, we'll just keep it at that, and we will just fire for effect. The reason you're not doing a drop or add 50 is because you're already within that 50-meter ECR, so you can just fire for effect right out the gate. For the one round adjust, let's say your round lands right here. From here to the target, let's just say that's 50. OT factor is just going to be assumed to be 1. You're 1,000 meters away from the target. You're extremely confident that this is exactly 50 to the right. I'm sorry, 50 to the left. So you're going to make one bold, one round correction. You're just going to do right 50. Fire for effect. And if you're correct, it'll land on the target. And you've made the correction in, you have hit the target in one correction. This is definitely by far the most difficult one because you don't really have even just the yardstick or the frame of reference. You have hasty bracketing. You just need to be incredibly confident that your correction is going to be accurate. So this is definitely not recommended for most fire missions and people who are not incredibly experienced. So typically just always stick with successive bracketing because it never fails as long as your TLE is within the range correction that you make here. So again, successive bracketing, if your TLE is within 400 meters of the target, add 400 or drop 400 depending on if it's above or below the target, it will work. With whatever method you chose for corrections, you have hit the target and you have determined it is time to enter the fire for effect phase because you have hit like one or more of these conditions. So the first condition for the criteria to enter fire for effect phase is break the 100-meter bracket for point targets. The second is break the 200-meter bracket for area targets. So in this situation, a point target is what I'm shooting at, which would be 2 BMPs because they are not extremely big targets. So I'm trying to hit a small point. So I need more accurate rounds. So the 100-meter bracket is what I need to break, which is out. So I dropped 100, and by breaking the 100-meter bracket, that means I'm going to be at or dropping 50. So if I'm making a correction of 50, I need to fire for effect. For air targets, this is like if you're hitting, let's say, I don't know, an airfield. So that is a big target, and you're trying to just crater the airfield to make enemy aircraft be unable to take off. That's obviously a really big target, so it's considered an area target. So if you are at 200, so let's say you did a correction of add or drop 200, and now you're about to add or drop 100, then you need to enter the fire for effect phase. Range correct spotting. So range correct just means that your initial or whatever you adjusted to, whether it be your initial adjustment round or one of the adjustments you made, it was in line with the target in laterally. So, let's say this is the target, and this is right here your round. It is range correct because they are laterally in line with each other. So all you need to do is make a deviation correction, and it should theoretically hit the target. So if this is the case, you should fire for effect. And then lastly, effects on target. So that means if any of your corrections land within that 50 ECR, so like let's just say anywhere around here, if it landed right there, you can fire for effect because you're close enough to the target to where fire for effecting makes sense. And now I will be going over the further comms in the fire mission. So this is for the fire for effecting. Observer is going to say target number Alpha Bravo 1025, fire for effect over. The battery is going to read that back. Battery is going to give you your shot call. The observer will read that back. They may or may not give a splash call. Now here's where you're going to get the new thing. Rounds complete. So when the battery transmits rounds complete, that means the battery has shot the final round out of their tubes. Now, you have to account for the time of flight. So if the battery is right here, and let's say you're right here, and the target is right here, it actually takes time for the rounds to go from the battery to the target. So let's say it takes 22 seconds. And in the message observer, you got 3 guns shooting 3 rounds. So if there's 3 guns shooting 3 rounds, that means you're going to get in total 9 rounds. So the first volley comes through, boom, hits. The second volley goes through, boom, hits. The battery shoots the third volley. Since you got 3 rounds, that means 3 volleys. So the third volley is shot. The battery is going to transmit target number Alpha Bravo 1025, rounds complete, over. You are not going to immediately read this back. You are going to wait until that last volley hits the deck and you observe the impacts of all the rounds. So they shoot the third one, they say rounds complete. In 22 seconds, you see the rounds impact. Then you are going to transmit target number Alpha Bravo 1025, rounds complete, out, because you have observed the completion of all the rounds impacting. And by this point, the fire mission is essentially over. So what you need to do is provide an end of mission statement. So what goes into an end of mission statement is REMS, refine, record, end of mission surveillance, also known as battle damage assessment. I am not going to be going over refine or record in this video because I think it is too much information for this one video. Essentially, this is just going to be used if you're going to record the target and use it for later reference. However, in most fire missions, this is not the case. So that's more of like a quote-unquote advanced thing. So I'm not going to go over that for now. What you're really going to worry about is the end of mission and surveillance. So, end of mission, this is literally just the observer stating end of mission. Surveillance being what the observer assessed the damage of the target. So let's say it destroyed both of the BMPs. So now you would transmit target number Alpha Bravo 1025, end of mission, 2 by BMPs in the open destroyed, over. And then the battery would simply read that back, and that would conclude the fire mission. Now, let's say they weren't destroyed. Let's say they were neutralized. You would say 2 by BMPs in the open neutralized. Let's say 1 was destroyed, 1 was neutralized. You'd say 1 by BMP destroyed, 1 by BMP destroyed. Sorry. 1 by BMP destroyed, 1 by BMP neutralized, over. So any effects you assess, you're just going to put them in this section, the battle damage assessment / surveillance. And once the battery reads this back, your fire mission has concluded. So overall, we have gone through the 3 transmissions required to initiate the call for fire. We've gone through the message observer, gone through the type of corrections and what those look like and how that would sound over the radio. We've talked about the criteria to enter the fire for effect phase. We've talked about the fire for effect phase, which is this right here. And we've talked about the end of mission statement. This is all you need to transmit and adjust fire mission with artillery or mortars using the grid method target location. At some point, I will make another video explaining the other types of target location, but grid will suffice for now. When it comes to mortars, I know I've been like almost solely, referencing artillery. It is the same exact thing for mortars. Instead of a battery, you'll have probably like a section or something like that. but it's the same exact call for fire in every way. There literally nothing changes. But yeah, that concludes this video about the just fire mission with artillery mortars using the grid method target location.